All right, well, welcome back. What I've done is I have rendered another thumbnail. So I'm going to pan over here real quickly just to show you basically what I was rendering. So I decided to include just a little bit of the bottom of the dock, and the camera is playing really nice with this at the moment, and you can see how it's silhouetting this tree, which creates this really nice diagonal. You can see it's a little bit more up and down, and on mine I wanted to give it a little bit more of a diagonal quality. So you could consider this next thumbnail either a diagonal or a silhouette. And if you're into silhouettes, I'm going to include on the video on the Canvas lecture an artist named Tom Thompson, and he was part of the Canadian 7, and he often worked in a silhouetted fashion, where he would take an element, usually something in the foreground, and he would block it out as one solid color against the other elements that would be a lot lighter in terms of value structure in the mid and background. And it's a pretty successful formula. It's one that landscape painters employ quite a bit. And also it can be nice because you're taking the attention off of an area, and it can be a little bit easier to paint that particular part of the landscape. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and repeat my process from that first thumbnail. Again, just working really light values. I'm going to go ahead and use the nifty feature. If you haven't figured this out, a lot of your palettes are similar to this. This one is, again, built with a little ring on the bottom, and what I can do is I can put my finger through that ring, and it actually becomes a little handy portable palette that I can just hold in my hand. Think of Bob Ross or something like that. Okay, so I can hold this palette in my hand, and I'm going to do that just for the sake of this one so you can see what's going on. So same sort of idea. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay in some really light values. I am going to preserve these whites of the clouds here. But again, if that blue comes down over the top of my trees or whatever, I'm fine with that. You have learned how to use masking and so on, though I don't think it's really necessary for these little thumbnails. But if you're more comfortable and you want to mask in some areas with some masking fluid to protect some whites, you can. Just know you're going to get a really hard edge, and you might want to smooth it out a little bit later. Okay, so now I've blocked in my sky. I'm going to get a little bit more creative in the water. I might come in here and add a little bit more of like a cad yellow, and then I'll glaze a little bit of turquoise blue into it. And same sort of thing. Right now I'm just trying to eliminate the white of the paper, give myself a nice juicy area that I can work into. I'm not worried about things running. If you are, you can always use like a Viva paper towel or something to kind of control your paint a little bit. So in fact, I can rest this here, so maybe it'll be a benefit for you to see my mixing. But now I'm going to come back in here and use a little bit of yellow ochre, and with the yellow ochre, a little bit of burnt umber. I'm going to come in here and just mass in the front of the dock. Okay. I am going to wait to silhouette my tree until I'm done painting all the other areas, right? So I'm working light to dark. And another tip is, you may have noticed what I did. I started in the background, and I'm just working from the background to the foreground, kind of massing in these lighter shapes. So this is going to look pretty familiar to what I did on this last little tutorial. So here I'm just going to mass in the dark. And that's about it. I don't want to overwork it at this stage, because I can definitely make my colors a little bit contaminated if I overwork them. And I'm a fan of this kind of stuff. See this wet to wet wash I'm getting here? There's no way I could have possibly controlled that. Or this pocket right here. To me, that's money in watercolor. Once you start to get this wet into wet bleeding effect, that can be just a lot of fun. So I'm going to let that dry, but in the meantime, what we can do is we can come back down to that first thumbnail that I was working initially. And now here's the stage where I can start to work my darker values. So if I start light, now what I can do is I can come back in here. I can mix in some darker values. Now, I want to keep some of those cool blues that we built in, and some of these violets breaking through the tree. That's actually kind of nice. But you can see what I'm doing is I'm just playing a game of chess where I'm thinking 2 or 3 moves in advance, right? So now I want to start thinking through my value structure and pushing these values here a little bit darker. And that's going to start giving a lot more depth to my work. I do want to be careful down here, probably not to get too dark, because I want the eye to be drawn back here. To me, in this circular composition, probably my favorite part is just these, the fact that we have these overlapping trees in the distance, and you're going to find that in Washington a lot. Really, what we have are compositions that are built on a series of kind of overlapping trees. Okay, so I might come in and start to mass in the shadow on that mallard down there. And then you could think of this as kind of a mini silhouette, but it might be dark enough for me to kind of come in here, start to mass in this tree. All right. I have to be careful because I don't want too much wet into wet happening up there, breaking out that tree. But I could definitely come in here and put in sort of a cast shadow right on that horizon line where the water is meeting. I will, in full disclosure, admit that I probably divided this thumbnail in half a little more than I should have. Had I not divided right down the middle, there'd be a little bit more tension. So I've taken a little bit of the tension off of this by dividing it close to the halfway point. Again, if that was dropped down a little bit more towards the bottom third or the 2/3 of the way up, that would probably have worked a little bit better. But anyway, now I'm coming in and I'm starting to glaze in these darker shapes. What I'm doing right now is I'm actually going back and forth between the two works. And that's not a bad way to work. As you wait for one to dry, if you want to sketch out 2 at a time, I'll often work this way where I'm working on more than one thumbnail at a time. But the silhouetted form is pretty nice, especially if you're worried about your drawing skills or you don't want to put in a lot of detail. I can just mass in. I got to be a little careful because I don't want too much of that to break into the other values. But you can see I'm starting to get this massed in shape here. I could do the same thing with the dock. Come and put those shadows. I included a couple pylons in the water that were right there too. And I can start to come in and mask those in a little bit darker value too. But I want to be careful, and I think one of the hardest things, especially when you're working small like this, if you want to work a little bit larger, you're certainly welcome to do so, and you have a little bit more freedom in terms of working your canvases, or your paper rather, as other areas start to dry. But I am at the mercy of kind of waiting for some of these pockets to dry, but it'll happen pretty quickly when you're outdoors, unless it's a real kind of crummy day. But now what I'm going to do is, again, thinking through my values, starting to work a little bit darker. I'm going to start glazing these trees to a little bit darker value. Don't be afraid to pound down some paint. You can see I'm really not worried about details at this stage. What I'm trying to do is I'm just massing in my bigger shapes, thinking of those bigger shapes first, and I come in and grab the smaller details later. I'm getting some nice wet to wet in there. I'm actually kind of finally starting to feel like I'm getting a little bit of depth in there. It was quite flat before, and it was flat because I just didn't have any contrast, right? So if you're doing a painting and you can't figure out why it feels so flat in watercolor, more often than not, it comes back to the value structure and the fact that you just don't have enough darks rooted in your composition. So you can certainly pull off what's called a high key work of art. There's exceptions, right? But you can see I'm starting to pound the paint in here a little bit darker, and that can be a little bit scary because it's true, it's not easy to necessarily come back and pull those values lighter, right? But it comes with a little bit of experience. But anyway, I'll go ahead and stop at about there at this point because I'm at another spot where I'm going to need this to dry. My little camera here only has so much memory, so I can't guarantee whether you're going to see the next phase or not. But if we're lucky enough, we'll come back and we'll do another layer of glaze and maybe attack the details a little bit more in this next stage. So anyway, we could fast forward over here. Let's take a look and see what Charles has brewing, because he's a master artist. Yeah. You should really go check out his website. He's awesome. But you can see Charles has done that same pattern throughout. Now what he's doing is he's built those base layers, and he's coming in and he's starting to glaze down some of those darker layers. So do you have any advice for the students, Charles, in terms of getting to this point?
Just listen to what Dave says, and that's usually the best advice. He's been giving me some good pointers, and so I'm learning a lot.
Excellent. I got to thank Charles. Charles gets an A++ all the time anyway. He's incredible. His charcoal and oil works will just knock your socks off. And he's a highly decorated artist. He's juried art shows, and in addition to that, Charles is also exhibited pretty widely. Tell us about the awards you won with the recent Veterans Exhibition.
Yeah. So I got 3 blue ribbons at there's a local Veterans Administration art competition. And so, because I got these 3 blue ribbons, this art is competing nationally. Last year I got a silver medal nationally, and so I'm hoping to 1, maybe 2 of these are going to go gold this year, but we'll see.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Do you have a group, if you're a veteran, that you can participate with and create art as well? That's going here.
There is, yeah. There is a group right now. Of course, we're all closed down, but. Yeah, I'll have to get I'll get Dave the website, and for those veterans that want to come in and just paint and have fun and interact with fellow veterans, it's a great opportunity.
All right, hey, sounds like a great invite. Thanks, Charles. All right, well, we'll get back to painting, and hopefully all of you are doing the same. So anyway, I'll try to pretend I'm a cameraman. Here we go. I'm gonna pan off on these little mallard ducks. They're swimming right past us. So. Anyway, okay, get busy, start sketching, and have fun. All right, thanks, friends.